Now we're going to look at how you'll feel. Now most of this video is a bit waffly. It's deliberately long to show that you can talk for a long while, but most of what's here you can get in other places, often a lot more concisely. A lot you can get by trial and error. You can buy your own masks, you can buy stuff on Amazon. A lot's expressed more clearly by other people. But here's where I and a few other people who still mask in UK schools, including my children, are the real experts. Now most people have given up on masking in the UK, just a few remain. Those who are still masking are definitely not doing it out of fear. People who are still masking are still taking individual personal responsibility for COVID safety. Now, individual personal responsibility is a bad idea. Imagine if you're the only teacher in the school telling children to tuck their shirts in, the only teacher who's telling students that gum is not allowed, the only teacher that's insisting that the children follow the routines in the school that they're supposed to follow. Now, UK schools don't leave things to individual personal responsibility because we know it doesn't work. Staff are expected to follow school policies so that children have consistent expectations from staff in all of their lessons. But we don't do that with COVID safety. For some reason, and there is a reason, we don't have whole school policies for COVID. We leave things to individual personal responsibility, even though we know it doesn't work. That doesn't make any sense until you realise that we do exactly the same thing with climate change. We leave climate change to individual personal responsibility. You can make your own decisions about whether you take a flight around the world to go on holiday, even though you emit vast amounts of carbon dioxide. You take individual personal responsibility for those emissions just like you take individual personal responsibility for the carbon emissions emitted by a big steak dinner. And it isn't working, and that's why we face catastrophic climate change. Why don't governments do anything about it? Why don't they pass laws so that Elon Musk can't make over 100 flights by private jet in a year? He emits many, many more times the amount of carbon dioxide that you and I do. Well, by leaving it to individual personal responsibility, governments can avoid acting. Now, it isn't working for climate change, and it isn't working for COVID, and we know it doesn't work for schools. It's really, really interesting why it doesn't work. If you want to know why, there's all sorts of psychology, all sorts of maths and economics behind it. I know much more about the psychology than I do about the maths. When it comes to masks, it's pretty simple to describe. Most people aren't willing to wear masks if other people don't have to. If everyone else is wearing masks, many, many people are happy to wear them. Now in maths, we talk about game theory, this thing called unstable Nash equilibria. Now I don't really understand it, but I've seen the film A Beautiful Mind about John Nash. In social psychology, we talk about ideas like peer pressure and conformity. But what it all means is that somebody still masking has managed to overcome all of those pressures to somehow give up, and they've managed to keep themselves masking. If you guys are going to start masking again, then you're going to have to join us. You're going to have to work out some way to overcome all of those pressures. So I'm going to look a little bit at the kinds of characteristics that someone probably still has if they're still masking. When it comes to overcoming peer pressure, the problem you've got is you've got your everyday experience of being in a room with loads of people unmasked versus what you know. And you know that you need to wear a mask and it's dangerous to go without one. Now, you're not alone in this. There are millions of people around the world who mask, including in schools. And you're now an ally to any students in your school who wear a mask, even if you don't teach them. Somewhere there's a conversation happening where a student feels wobbly and a parent's able to use the fact that you wear a mask in order to help steady their child. It's also going to make you a better teacher because you understand what it's like to be one who's perhaps a minority or perhaps one who's on their own. Now, peer pressure itself is an amazingly interesting idea. As I said, we're not doing this because we're afraid. If you ask people who are masking why they're still doing it, many will say to protect myself or to protect a family member. Now this might be because a family member is clinically vulnerable, such as having cancer treatment or a transplant. However, increasingly the message has got round that COVID is not something you want to get. Not something you want your family members to get. Something that might cause long-term health problems for you or for your family, even if they don't have any pre-existing health conditions. Except that if you've had COVID before, you may well be considered to have a pre-existing health condition. Now, these reasons ought to apply to everyone, but some mask and most don't. So why? Well, some of us have long histories of non-conformity, though not me as it happens. Lots of us have experience with ill health or hospitals, or have family members who do. Some people are motivated by high moral principles, though I don't know if that's me. Some people have something that allows them to resist peer pressure. For example, many neurodivergent people feel that their experiences allow them to resist peer pressure. For me, I think it's my long experience of psychology, and studying it and teaching it, that's given me the chance to think about social pressures and how to act independently. Now, some people have knowledge or learned about COVID much earlier than others have, Want to give a big shout out to Disability Twitter, who've been consistently further ahead of me in highlighting the problems of COVID infections. Without them, I don't know where we'd be. And obviously I want to highlight Independent Sage. Now, all these things give people the ability to question authority, to recognise that some authorities are more informed or more trustworthy than others. They also mean that people haven't been able to put COVID out of their mind. Now, if you fit in one of these categories, maybe you can draw strength from it. It's perfectly normal to feel awkward if you find yourself being the only one masking. Perhaps you can reassure yourself that your masking fits with something that's very important to you. Or perhaps you might tell yourself, they might not be masking, but I'm doing this for my family. Or they might not be masking, but I know more than they do. Now, I've been asking on Twitter about why children are still masking. The answers I'm getting are overwhelmingly to protect myself and protect my family. But there's also a theme that some children are able to see past the gaslighting, that they understand that COVID is harmful, no matter what some people might say to them. Now, if you are motivated by high moral principles, there's all sorts of things you can do. If you're in the UK, then wearing a mask is going to make it really, really clear that you do not support the Tory party policies on anything at all. In fact, I bet there's someone you don't like, someone who annoys you. They could be a public figure, they could be someone you know personally, who doesn't like you wearing a mask. Perhaps you can draw some strength from the fact that you're annoying them. Or if you want a bit more positive, you can say that you're being part of positive social change, and that in order to get lots and lots of people masking, you're going to have to mask yourself and be a role model in that way. So if you want to say, well, you're actually very important as a role model, you're now a very important teacher in the school, then that's a great motivation to have as well. Now, what's pretty frustrating for those of us who mask is that there are many people who have these characteristics, but they're not masking. Not every climate change activist is also a COVID activist, though many are, and in increasing numbers, because people have realised how COVID and climate change are linked. Not every religious minister wants to protect others. Not every person who has had a sick child in hospital wants to protect children. Not every historian recognises how our situation is not new. Plenty of countries have had periods where they don't do an honest reflection of the events they go through. For me, it's frustrating that more people with psychology qualifications aren't masking. We know about conformity, we know about social influence, we know about allies, we know how to act independently. It's frustrating to me that they aren't doing that. Now, speaking of psychology, cognitive dissonance is at play. People find it difficult to act in ways that are inconsistent with how they think or feel. We might resolve cognitive dissonance in different ways. Some people like me make big commitments to COVID safety because they know that COVID is a big deal. For others, they may look at others who are not responding and think that COVID is no big deal. It's one of the reasons why masking is so divisive. Seeing someone like me masking might make some people feel uncomfortable, though I don't get much stick personally. It's probably because I'm a straight, cis, middle-aged white man in reasonable health. Those who aren't might have other challenges.